assemble a small tower with 3D scanned stones. So these are my meshes which are already distributed in the scene. Therefore you can use the gumball, you can just pull and push. And what would be a good strategy at first is to figure out the center of mass of those objects. Therefore I created this layer centroid, which I assigned a magenta color. And what you can do now is you can just click on the object, and then there's the command underscore volume centroid. And if you click on that, you won't see it now because the mesh is really dense. But if you select it, you see here's this point, which I will now put on the centroid. Yeah, so this is the center of mass as well. It's the volumetric center, which is also the center of mass. The same can be done for all the other objects. And what you should do now is to make sure that those are relatively well on one line. So what you could do for this is just draw a curve from the lowest point straight up. So this is now a super straight line. And what you could do now is you could group the object with a point together. You can do that by group object here. The same thing I do for this object. And now if I turn off the objects again, I can just, by moving the points onto the curve, I'm sure that the center of mass will be exactly in a horizontal line. And because I grouped it, the meshes are moved accordingly as the points are. Now I want to create the boxes, therefore I just, let's say this is the object that you want to use as the connector. I would just move it to the object, push and pull it a bit down, maybe I have to scale it. I hope you do a way better job on this than I do. Again, make sure that it's hopefully in the center of the curve, as you see here. You can copy the object, move it up as well. You see you have to scale it a little bit more by pulling here. And then you can, with mesh Boolean difference, you can cut away those objects. Now I forgot to make a copy beforehand, but you can just copy the object. I just pressed Ctrl Z and just paste it again into the scene. Same you can do here, mesh Boolean difference. Select this object first, enter, and then subtract with those objects. Again, copy this object by pressing Ctrl C, Ctrl Z to go back and paste the object. So now I have all my objects in the scene, and what I want to show you next is how to do a proper make 2D rendering from it for export to Illustrator. What you have to keep in mind is you have to find the exact same position as in your photograph for that. So you can move here the object. You could even place a background image, which is done by, or no, you can place it as a wallpaper here, but I don't have it for this scene now, so first try this yourself, and if you have questions you can just click here and put any picture in the background. What you have to keep in mind is you can also set the focal length to the same length as your camera, which you have to figure out somehow and know in advance. What you have to do in any case is to create I will delete those now, those files here. I already created them. You have to create a low poly representations of your meshes, because otherwise you will see all those lines in your mesh. And what we will do therefore is we will create this layer low quality to have a lower quality representation of the mesh, and select those mesh and go to mesh edit tool and reduce mesh. And what you can do now is reduce to a certain amount of mesh faces. So let's for instance try 1000. Now you will see up in the top left corner that it starts calculating. Takes some time. What is good if you set it by reducing mesh polygons instead of using reduce by percent is that you will make sure that all the polygons have the same amount of polygons. That looks fine for what we have in mind. Okay, now because I did the preview it has to calculate again. And there we are. Now we have a low quality example, and what you see now again is the same problem as before, as I didn't create a copy. If I move this thing now to the low quality and I turn it off, I don't have the higher resolution anymore. So make sure you make copies beforehand of your objects to the other layer. I will just make a copy here, Control Z. So here's my high resolution, and if I paste, here's my low resolution thing again. I copy this, paste them again, and now I move them directly to the low quality. I turn off the high quality layer, and now I will also reduce those with the same, or as this is a little bit smaller, I will do, 80 is not enough. Make sure you have a number around 1000. Okay, and there we are, and same with this mesh. Here again, go for 1000. And now I have the mesh ready, which looks like a good resolution for what I have in mind. And now I want to show you how I do a make 2D. So I select all the objects, make sure you turn off the centroid so you don't have this line in your drawing, and then you go underscore make 2D. Here are certain properties you can assign, like which projection. We use the view, and we want to maintain the source layers to access the different drawn lines for the stones for this object and also for our base. We can also create a scene silhouette, viewport rectangle, which I would recommend, and we can also group these things. All the rest I would turn off for now. You press OK. Again, that may take some time to calculate. And then the make 2D goes into the, you will see it in the top view. And now we have this problem that the mesh is not properly, the curves are not properly assigned. So that didn't work. In that case, what we might have to do is set the tolerance a bit higher. That might be one solution. Let's see. Also not the solution. So in order to visualize the... Was denn? Kann kurz Pause machen, oder? So in order to visualize the edges of the mesh, I anyway started off so often. I will edit it out, yeah.
Now I know.
Okay. Okay. So in order to visualize the edges of the mesh, which you didn't have in the normal Make 2D, we have to extract the wireframe of the meshes. So therefore select all the meshes and click underscore extract wireframe. When you click on that, you will see there are these black edges now, and if we now go on Make 2D and export that, run the Make 2D command, you should see in the top view the proper Make 2D. In some cases there are some edges missing, which I would ignore for now. You can either redraw them, or you have to, or if you don't want to do that, you have to pay a little bit more attention to, for instance, the extrusion here will create some problems if we put that on hidden for now and run the Make 2D again. Again, make sure you have a good perspective. A little bit better, not perfect, but for now that should be good enough. So in order to export this file now to Illustrator, we can select the whole thing and export it here under Export Selected into an Illustrator file. Put it on my desktop, mesh to Illustrator, save. That's all good. And now if you go into your desktop There should be the Illustrator file, which you can open by double-clicking. And now you see here the file, and we also see all the layers from Rhino are exported. We can scale it by holding down the Shift button to have it proportionally. And now as a first step, what I usually do, you can also change the document scale by clicking on document setting. Escape will confirm that. So again, document properties. And now you can set the line thicknesses. Probably it will be good to have something like 0.2. And now it already looks better. You can go into the different layers. For instance, you can, by clicking here, you can select the whole silhouette, and if we want to give it a stronger silhouette, press on this. Now you see there's a thicker edge here. I also want to make sure they're all black, for instance. Now they all look black. It might make sense to shut down the viewport rectangle, and you could also, by clicking through here, you see which layers it is. If you want to give those edges, for instance, grayscale, a little bit lighter, you can, by this you can assign a lighter color to it. If you now also want to put a background, like a shaded background onto it, I would go back again into your viewport, scale it up, make sure you didn't move it. I will also show you now a way to save a view. You can go on set view, and there's something called named views. You can just save a view, call it 1 for instance, and now you see here's 1, so even if I move, I can always go by double click, I can go back to view 1. And now, for instance, you want to use the rendered view, which on my machine doesn't work very good because my graphic card is not very strong. You see it has created some problems. But what you could also try is the ray traced viewport. It takes a little bit more time. Yeah, it seems my machine doesn't like it at all. Beforehand, I would go to render and go to render properties to make sure that you have a transparent background. Yeah, that might be really helpful. In our case, I would turn off the ground plane and then press OK, and then you don't have to do more than just click on render. This you can avoid. Skip that, and now it should render, which will take some time on my computer. You now see here the shaded objects. And that's it. Of course you can dig more into it, but I like the simple gray-white coloring. I would recommend to save it as PNG, as this keeps the transparent background. I call it rendering again on the desktop. I will show you again how to import it. So in Mac you can just place it like this, or you can also use the in Illustrator Datei platzieren. Just place the object in here. As it's the same size, you can just scale it down. It should perfectly fit below. Now you have to make sure that in the layers, in the Ebenen, to move it all the way down, and there we are. Now we have a shaded background image with the curves. What I don't like yet so much is somehow here are some silhouettes missing, so in our case I would just select all the curves and give it 1 thickness just to avoid this extra thick curve. In my case now there's a little bit too much information, so I can just move it like this, and yeah, depending on you, if you want to place an image next to it, keep it like that or like this. Escape to save the changing of the drawing area, and then just save as. And I would recommend to save it as a PDF. And that's it. This will have a better resolution. The lines are very, very well drawn, and that should be good enough for what we are after here. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, just write it into the comments below the video. See you soon.